Millionaire got call from X after 19 years. Our daughter needs a donor. Only your blood can save her. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty cover you with His endless mercy. May your homes shine with peace, your hearts overflow with love, and your families be guarded in every step you take. May every hardship melt into ease, every tear be turned into a smile, and may your days be filled with blessings beyond measure. My precious family, life is too short to waste on anger or pride. Hold your loved ones close. Speak gently, forgive without delay, and give your family the love they deserve. True treasure is not found in riches. It is found in the warmth of a kind word, the embrace of family, and the bond we build together. Every story I share is my gift of love to you. Please stay with me till the end, because your trust is my strength, and your loyalty keeps this family alive forever. If your heart is true, right, present. If your love is real, right, I am with Mr. Peter. Some moments in life arrive like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and forever changing the landscape of your heart, leaving you breathless and utterly transformed. Jacob Morris stood at the edge of the charity gala's moonlit garden, his tailored black tuxedo fitting his 25-year-old frame perfectly, yet feeling constrained by the evening's suffocating social obligations. The string quartet's melody drifted through the French doors behind him, mixing with the gentle rustle of autumn leaves and the distant laughter of Manhattan's elite. He had stepped outside to escape the conversations about mergers and acquisitions that dominated his father's world, seeking solace in the crisp October air. Then she appeared, and time stopped. Sophia Beaumont emerged from the ballroom, like a vision materialized from his deepest dreams, her flowing emerald silk gown catching the golden light spilling from the mansion's windows. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder in loose waves, revealing the graceful curve of her neck that made his breath catch. She moved with unconscious elegance, her hand trailing along the stone balustrade as she descended the steps into the garden, completely unaware that she was shattering someone's world with her mere presence. Jacob's heart hammered against his ribs with violent intensity. In 25 years of living, breathing, existing, he had never felt his soul recognize another person so completely, so instantly. Escaping too? Sophia's voice carried a hint of laughter, warm and melodic like honey poured over velvet, with an undertone of gentle mischief that made his pulse race. I was. Jacob replied, finding his voice, though it felt foreign and rough on his tongue. Until this moment. Until you. Their eyes met across the garden path, and Jacob felt the earth shift beneath his feet. Sophia's deep brown eyes held starlight and secrets, intelligence and warmth that drew him like gravity itself. The distance between them seemed to crackle with electricity, so powerful he could taste it on the night air. I'm Sophia, she said, extending her hand with a grace that made his heart skip 3 beats in succession. Jacob. He took her hand, and the simple touch sent fire racing through his veins, lighting every nerve ending. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm, perfect. Jacob Morris. Recognition flickered in her eyes, but not the calculating interest he usually encountered. The Morris heir. I should have guessed from the way you carry yourself. Please, he said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a caress that made her breath hitch. Tonight, I'm just Jacob, a man who's been waiting his entire life to meet you. Sophia's lips parted in surprise, her cheeks flushing rose in the moonlight. That's quite a line, Mr. Morris. It's not a line, Jacob said with quiet intensity that made her shiver. It's the absolute truth. I've been standing in gardens my whole life, waiting for you to walk into one. They began walking deeper into the garden, drawn by an invisible force neither could resist. The night air carried the intoxicating scent of jasmine and roses, creating a perfume that seemed designed specifically for this moment of destiny. Chinese lanterns swayed overhead, casting dancing shadows that made everything feel magical, otherworldly. What do you do when you're not being mysterious and charming? Sophia asked, her voice slightly breathless as Jacob's presence continued to affect her in ways she'd never experienced. "I try to figure out how to escape the life that's been planned for me," Jacob admitted with startling honesty. "My father has everything mapped out: business school, corporate positions, strategic marriages to suitable families. But sometimes I lie awake wondering what would happen if I just chose love instead." Sophia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "And what would you choose?" Jacob looked at her, really looked, taking in the intelligence in her eyes, the compassion in her smile, the way she listened as if his words were the most important thing in the universe. "Right now, I'd choose to spend every remaining moment of my life making you laugh, making you happy, learning everything about the woman who just walked out of my dreams and into my reality." Jacob. His name on her lips was barely a whisper, filled with wonder and something that might have been recognition. "Dance with me," he said suddenly, urgently. "Right here, right now. I need to hold you, Sophia. I need to know this is real." "There's no music," she whispered, though she was already stepping into his arms. "Listen," Jacob murmured, pulling her against him. "Can you hear it? The way our hearts beat together. That's the only music I'll ever need." Sophia melted into his embrace, and Jacob knew with absolute, bone-deep certainty that his life had just divided into two parts: the empty years before Sophia and the meaningful forever that would begin tonight. They moved together with an ease that defied logic, as if they had been dancing together across lifetimes. "You're dangerous, Jacob Morris," Sophia murmured against his chest, her words vibrating through him like a benediction. "Tell me why," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because you make me believe in fairy tales, in soulmates, in the kind of love that changes everything." She pulled back to look at his face, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've never believed in love at first sight." "Neither have I," Jacob replied, cupping her face with trembling hands. "But this isn't sight, Sophia. This is recognition. This is coming home." They continued to dance as the party raged on behind them, lost in their own private universe. Jacob told her about his dreams of building something meaningful rather than just profitable, of traveling to places where his name meant nothing and his heart meant everything. Sophia shared her passion for teaching children to see beauty in the world, her dreams of opening an art gallery where creativity could flourish without commercial constraints. "I want to show children that they can paint sunshine and sculpt dreams," Sophia said, her eyes lighting up with passion that made Jacob's chest tight with emotion. "Marry me," Jacob said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Sophia's eyes went wide. "Jacob, we just met, did we?" he challenged gently. "Because I feel like I've known you forever. Like I've been incomplete my entire life, waiting for the other half of my soul to find me." "You're insane," Sophia laughed, but her eyes were bright with possibility. "I'm in love," Jacob corrected. "Completely, utterly, desperately in love with you, Sophia Beaumont. And I know it's crazy, and I know it's fast, but I also know that what I feel for you is bigger than time, bigger than logic, bigger than anything I've ever experienced." Sophia stared at him, searching his face in the moonlight. "Ask me again in 3 months. Will your answer be yes?" "Ask me and find out." Jacob leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Sophia rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, like the first note of a symphony. Then Sophia's hands fisted in his lapels, and Jacob deepened the kiss, pouring 25 years of waiting for something he hadn't even known he was missing into the connection between their lips. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Sophia's lipstick was smudged, her careful hair slightly mussed, and Jacob thought she had never looked more beautiful. 3 months, she whispered against his lips. 3 months, Jacob agreed, already knowing it would feel like 3 lifetimes. As Sophia finally departed that night, Jacob remained in the garden, touching his lips and marveling at how completely his world had transformed in the span of one magical evening. The scent of jasmine would forever be the fragrance of falling in love. The memory of this night, the cornerstone of everything beautiful in his life. But as he watched her car disappear into the city, Jacob had no way of knowing that their perfect beginning would someday lead to heartbreak so profound it would reshape them both. Or that 20 years later he would be racing through hospital corridors, desperate to save the daughter they would create from this night of destiny. Chapter 2. Heaven in Each Other's Arms. True love doesn't arrive with fanfare. It settles into your bones, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering in the wilderness of ordinary moments. 3 months after their first meeting, Jacob Morris found himself transformed beyond recognition. The man who had once lived for quarterly reports and board meetings now measured his days by Sophia's laughter, his nights by the warmth of her hand in his. Every moment apart felt like borrowed time, every reunion like a small resurrection of his soul. "You're different," his best friend David Reynolds observed as they sat in Jacob's office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. David's voice carried a note that Jacob couldn't quite identify, something that sounded almost like loss. "You smile now. Real smiles, not those corporate masks you perfected for board meetings." Jacob couldn't deny it. Sophia had awakened something in him that he hadn't even realized was dormant. She saw past the Morris name and fortune to the man beneath, encouraging his dreams while challenging his assumptions about everything he thought he wanted from life. "I'm going to propose," Jacob announced, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. David's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips, his knuckles white against the porcelain. "After 3 months? Jacob, you barely know her. I know she makes me want to be the man she sees when she looks at me," Jacob replied with quiet conviction. "I know that when she laughs, the whole world becomes brighter. I know that she donates half her teaching salary to children's charities, even though she can barely afford her own rent. I know that she cries at old movies and makes pancakes shaped like hearts on Sunday mornings. Jacob, I know that she talks to stray cats and believes everyone deserves a second chance," Jacob continued, his voice growing stronger. "I know that she sees beauty in broken things and finds hope in impossible situations. And I know that I can't imagine drawing another breath without her beside me." David studied his friend's face, noting the absolute certainty there, the kind of conviction most men never achieved in a lifetime. Something flickered behind his eyes. Was it envy? "Then I guess you'd better find the perfect ring." Jacob had already been thinking about that. His grandmother's ring, a stunning vintage piece with a center diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a delicate Art Deco setting, seemed destined for Sophia's finger. It was elegant without being ostentatious, classic yet unique, much like Sophia herself. The proposal itself had to be perfect. Not grand or showy, but intimate and meaningful. Jacob planned for 2 weeks, considering and discarding dozens of scenarios before settling on the place where their story began. He called Sophia on a Thursday evening, his heart racing despite their months of easy intimacy. "Jacob!" Sophia's voice carried the smile he could picture perfectly. "You sound nervous." "Should I be worried?" "Never," he said softly. "I was wondering. Would you come back to where we first met? There's something I want to share with you." "The Pemberton estate? But there's no party tonight." "Trust me?" The pause that followed felt like an eternity, though it was probably only heartbeats. "With my life," Sophia replied, and Jacob's soul soared. Saturday evening found them walking the same garden paths where they had first danced, though now autumn had given way to early spring. The air was soft and warm, filled with the promise of new beginnings and the sweet scent of cherry blossoms. Sophia wore a flowing white sundress that made her look like an angel, her hair loose around her shoulders in the way Jacob loved best. "It's magical here," Sophia murmured as they approached the fountain where they had shared their first kiss. "I can almost hear the music from that night." "Can you?" Jacob asked, pulling out his phone and selecting their song. The same waltz that had played during the charity gala began to drift from the speaker, carried on the evening breeze like a gift from the universe. Sophia turned to him with wonder in her eyes, her hand flying to her heart. "You remembered." "I remember everything about that night," Jacob said, taking her hands in his. "The way the moonlight turned your hair to silk, the sound of your laugh, the exact moment I realized my real life was finally beginning." They danced again beside the fountain, moving with the same natural rhythm they had discovered months ago. But this time, Jacob felt the weight of the ring box in his pocket, the magnitude of the question that would determine their entire future. "Sophia," he began as the music faded, his voice husky with emotion. "Before I met you, I was sleepwalking through life, going through the motions of living without actually feeling alive. But you woke me up. You showed me what it means to have a soul." Sophia's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. Jacob, what are you—" "Let me finish," he said gently, sinking to one knee beside the fountain where they had first kissed. "I love how you see potential in everything, even broken things. I love how you believe in people when they don't believe in themselves. I love your terrible singing voice and the way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking." Sophia's hands flew to her mouth, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I love your compassion and your strength and the way you make me want to be worthy of you," Jacob continued, pulling out his grandmother's ring. "I love you, Sophia Beaumont, with every breath in my body, every beat of my heart, every thought in my mind. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me?" For a moment that felt like forever, Sophia was speechless, staring at the ring that sparkled in the evening light. Then she was in his arms, kissing him with all the passion and promise of their future together. "Yes," she gasped between kisses, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, yes, forever, yes." Jacob slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, marveling at how perfectly it fit, as if his grandmother had somehow known it would one day belong to the woman who would complete her grandson's soul. Sophia held up her hand, watching the diamonds catch the light, then looked at Jacob with such overwhelming love that he felt his chest might burst. "It's perfect," she whispered. "We're perfect." "Together we're everything," Jacob corrected, pulling her close. Their wedding 3 months later was everything Sophia had dreamed of and more, held in a small chapel overlooking the ocean, with white roses and baby's breath adorning every surface. It was intimate and romantic rather than grand. Sophia walked down the aisle to Pachelbel's cannon, her simple but elegant dress flowing behind her like sea foam, her face radiant with joy. Jacob waited at the altar in his classic black tuxedo, tears streaming down his face as he watched his bride approach. David served as best man, though his smile seemed forced. Sophia's best friend Lily Warren stood as maid of honor, while Sophia's mother Rose beamed from the front row, having embraced Jacob as the son she'd never had. "Do you, Jacob Morris, take Sophia to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish through whatever life may bring?" the minister asked. "I do," Jacob replied, his voice strong and clear despite his tears. "Forever and always, through everything. Do you, Sophia Beaumont, take Jacob to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and support through all of life's joys and sorrows?" "I do," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "for all of my days and beyond." The kiss that sealed their marriage was tender yet passionate, full of promise for their future together. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Jacob caught Sophia's hand and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure, unfiltered joy. Their honeymoon in Tuscany was like a beautiful dream. They stayed in a villa surrounded by vineyards, spending their days exploring medieval towns hand in hand, and their nights making love under starlit skies. It was there, on their last night, as they lay entwined on the terrace overlooking rolling hills dotted with olive trees, that Sophia told him the news that would change everything. "Jacob," she whispered against his chest, her voice filled with wonder and a touch of nervousness. I have something to tell you. Anything, he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I'm pregnant. Jacob's heart stopped, then started again with double intensity. He pulled back to look at her face, searching for any sign of doubt or fear. Instead, he found only radiant joy mixed with beautiful vulnerability. Really? He breathed, his voice barely audible. Really? Sophia placed his hand on her still flat stomach, her eyes bright with tears. Our baby, our little miracle. Jacob kissed her then with all the love in his heart, tasting tears on both their lips, though neither could say who was crying. As they held each other under the Tuscan stars, Jacob felt as if he were living in a perfect dream from which he never wanted to wake. I love you, Mrs. Morris, he murmured into her hair, the title making his heart swell with pride. And I love you, Mr. Morris, she replied, snuggling closer. Forever and always. But as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, neither could foresee the storm clouds gathering on the horizon of their perfect love story, or the betrayal that would soon test everything they believed about love, trust, and forever. Chapter 3. Cracks in Paradise. Even the strongest foundations can develop hairline fractures when the weight of the world presses down too hard. 6 months into Sophia's pregnancy, their Manhattan penthouse felt more like a beautiful prison than a sanctuary. Jacob's expanding business empire demanded increasingly long hours, leaving Sophia to navigate pregnancy largely alone. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand on her rounded belly, watching the city pulse with life below while feeling utterly disconnected. The baby kicked all night, she told Jacob over breakfast, desperate to share the wonder of feeling their child move. I think she's going to be a dancer. Jacob looked up from his tablet, coffee growing cold beside untouched toast. That's wonderful, sweetheart, he said absently, already mentally preparing for his 9 o'clock meeting. Did you remember to call Dr. Pierce? Sophia's smile faltered. I was hoping you might come today. She said we could find out if it's definitely a girl. I'll try, Jacob replied, though they both knew he wouldn't make it. This merger with Harrison Industries is critical. After Jacob left, Sophia wandered through their pristine apartment, footsteps echoing in rooms that felt too large and empty. She had quit teaching at Jacob's insistence, but the endless hours stretched before her with nothing but prenatal classes attended alone. Her mother's call broke the silence. And how are you feeling, darling? Lonely, Sophia admitted, and scared. I feel like I'm losing Jacob one late night at a time. Men handle pregnancy differently, Rose said gently. For Jacob, it might not feel entirely real yet. That evening, Sophia attempted to bridge the growing chasm. She prepared Jacob's favorite meal and lit candles, hoping to recreate lost intimacy. Jacob arrived at 10 o'clock with David Reynolds, both deep in business conversation. Sophia. David's face lit up, his eyes lingering inappropriately. You look absolutely radiant. As Sophia prepared coffee, David positioned himself closer when Jacob stepped away to take a call. Jacob's incredibly lucky to have you, David said quietly, his tone making Sophia uncomfortable. Not many women would be so understanding. A woman like you deserves more attention than she's getting. Before Sophia could respond, Jacob returned, and David immediately shifted to casual conversation. But when Jacob left his phone on the coffee table, Sophia noticed David glance at it with calculating interest. The baby was very active today, Sophia said later, placing her hand over Jacob's. We're having a daughter. I'm thinking of Chloe. It means new beginnings. Jacob smiled genuinely. Chloe Morris. I love it. For a moment the distance seemed to shrink. Then his phone buzzed, and his attention shifted back to business. Over the following weeks, the pattern intensified. Sophia began feeling like a stranger in her own life, watching her husband slip away one meeting at a time. At a charity gala, Sophia first noticed Vivian Sterling. Tall, elegant, sophisticated, Vivian moved through the crowd with predatory confidence. When she approached Jacob, Sophia watched with growing unease. Jacob Morris, Vivian purred. Vivian Sterling. My father spoke highly of your Harrison acquisition work. Miss Sterling, Jacob replied politely. Your father's reputation is legendary. Call me Vivian. Father is very interested in partnering with Morris Industries. Something about Vivian's possessive tone set off alarm bells in Sophia's mind. When introduced, Vivian's smile cooled, her gaze sweeping over Sophia's pregnant form with disdain. When are you due? Vivian asked. 2 months, Sophia replied protectively. How exciting! Jacob must be thrilled. The way she said it made families sound like a burden. Throughout the evening, Vivian stayed near Jacob, touching his arm, positioning herself prominently. Jacob appeared oblivious, but Sophia saw the hunting strategy clearly. At home, Sophia voiced her concerns. That woman was looking at you like she was staking a claim. She's Richard Sterling's daughter. Her connections could be valuable, Jacob said dismissively, then regretted his tone when hurt flashed across Sophia's face. You're probably just tired. But the damage was done. Sophia felt dismissed, her concerns brushed aside. As Jacob buried himself in his phone, Sophia retreated to bed, feeling more alone than ever. Something was shifting in their marriage, fundamental trust eroding grain by grain. Sophia felt it in her bones. Their perfect love story was beginning to crumble. Little did she know that someone much closer was orchestrating a betrayal that would destroy everything they held dear. Chapter 4. The Message That Destroyed Everything. Sometimes the most devastating storms arrive not with thunder and lightning, but with the quiet ping of a message that rewrites your entire understanding of love and trust. Sophia stood in the nursery they had decorated together with such hope and excitement, her hands resting on her 7-month belly as she surveyed the pale yellow walls and white furniture that would soon welcome their daughter. The room was perfect, soft, peaceful, filled with love and anticipation. Yet Sophia felt a growing unease that she couldn't shake, a shadow that seemed to follow her through their once happy home like a persistent ghost. Jacob had been gone for 3 days on a business trip to Chicago, finalizing details of a partnership that would expand Morris Industries internationally. His calls had been brief and distracted, filled with talk of contracts and board meetings, leaving Sophia feeling more disconnected from him than ever. She missed him desperately, but more than that, she missed the man he used to be, the one who had danced with her in moonlit gardens and promised her forever. The sound of Jacob's phone buzzing on the nightstand startled her from her melancholy thoughts. He must have forgotten it in his rush to catch his flight, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago when they were still inseparable. Sophia smiled slightly, imagining his frustration at being disconnected from his business empire for even a few hours. She was about to ignore the device when it buzzed again, then again in rapid succession. Concerned that it might be an emergency, Sophia picked up the phone to see if she should contact Jacob at his hotel. The screen showed multiple unread messages, and her finger accidentally brushed against one, opening it before she could stop herself. The message was from Vivian Sterling, and the words seemed to leap off the screen, each one a dagger piercing Sophia's heart. I can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible, darling. I know this is complicated with everything happening at home, but what we have is real. I've been patient, but seeing you with her tonight at the charity event, I can't pretend anymore. When you're ready to make a choice, I'll be waiting. All my love, V. Sophia's world tilted on its axis, reality shifting beneath her feet like sand. The phone slipped from her trembling hands, clattering to the hardwood floor as she sank onto the edge of their bed. The bed where they had made love, where they had whispered dreams and promises, where she had told him about their baby. The words blurred together through her tears, but their meaning was crystal clear. Jacob, her Jacob, the father of her unborn child, the man who had sworn to love her forever, was having an affair. The pregnancy hormones that had been making her emotional for months now amplified her devastation tenfold. Sophia felt as if she were drowning, struggling to breathe as the reality of Vivian's message crashed over her in waves of nausea and heartbreak. All those late nights, those business dinners, those times when Jacob seemed distant and distracted, it all made horrible, devastating sense now. She forced herself to pick up the phone with shaking hands, reading the message again to make sure she hadn't misunderstood. But there was no ambiguity in Vivian's words, no innocent explanation for such intimate declarations of love and talk of choices and being patient. Sophia stumbled to the bathroom and was violently sick, her body rejecting the betrayal as surely as her heart did. When the nausea passed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale, puffy-eyed, 7 months pregnant with the child of a man who was apparently preparing to leave her for another woman. "How could you?" she whispered to her reflection, her voice broken and raw. "How could you do this to us, to our baby?" She thought of all the signs she had missed or chosen to ignore. Vivian's predatory smile at charity events, the way she positioned herself near Jacob, those business dinners that seemed to run later and later, Jacob's growing distance and distraction. Sophia had voiced her concerns, only to be dismissed as paranoid and hormonal, while all along her instincts had been right. The worst part was remembering how Jacob had comforted her fears, how he had kissed her forehead and told her she was imagining things, while all along he was betraying everything they had built together. The lies felt like acid in her veins, burning away every sweet memory they had created, poisoning every moment of happiness they had shared. Sophia's phone rang, and Jacob's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, she couldn't bring herself to answer, couldn't bear to hear his voice, knowing what she now knew. How could she pretend everything was normal when her world had just shattered into a million irreparable pieces? But on the 4th ring she picked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello? Sophia, you sound terrible. Are you all right? Is the baby okay?" Jacob's concern sounded genuine, which made everything infinitely worse. How could he sound so caring when he was planning to leave them? "I'm fine," she lied, the words feeling like broken glass in her throat. "Just tired." "I miss you," Jacob said softly, and Sophia had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing into the phone. "I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. We can have dinner together, just the two of us. I feel like we haven't really connected in weeks." The irony was devastating. Now that she knew about his affair, Jacob wanted to connect. Sophia closed her eyes, wondering if he planned to ask for a divorce over dinner, if he would tell her about Vivian then, or continue the charade until their daughter was born. "Sophia, are you there?" "Yes," she managed, her voice barely audible. "I'll see you tomorrow." "I love you," Jacob said softly, and Sophia had to press her hand over her mouth to muffle her sob. "Goodbye." "Jacob!" She hung up before he could respond, unable to bear hearing him say words that had become lies. Sophia spent the rest of the day in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of her daily routine, while her mind reeled from the discovery. She cooked dinner but couldn't eat, started a book but couldn't focus on the words, tried to sleep but lay awake staring at the ceiling as their baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. By the time Jacob's key turned in the lock the next afternoon, Sophia had made her decision. She couldn't continue living a lie, pretending everything was fine while her husband planned to leave her for another woman. She deserved better than that, and so did their daughter. "Sophia," Jacob called out as he entered their apartment, his voice warm with anticipation. "I brought your favorite chocolates from that little shop in Chicago." Sophia emerged from the nursery, Vivian's message screenshot on her phone screen. Jacob's smile faded when he saw her expression. Cold, distant, devastated. "We need to talk," Sophia said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "Of course," Jacob replied, setting down his briefcase with growing concern. "What's wrong? You look like you've been crying for days." Instead of answering, Sophia held up his phone, the message clearly visible. Jacob's face went white as he read Vivian's words, his mouth opening and closing without sound, as comprehension dawned. "Sophia, I can explain." "Can you?" Sophia's voice was still deadly calm, which was somehow more frightening than if she had screamed. "Can you explain how you've been having an affair while I carry your child? Can you explain how you dismissed my concerns about that woman while you were sleeping with her? Can you explain how you told me you loved me yesterday while planning to leave me for her?" "It's not what it looks like," Jacob said desperately, reaching for her with panic in his eyes. "I haven't been having an affair. I've never even been alone with Vivian outside of business meetings. This message, I don't understand it. I never sent or received anything like this." Sophia stepped back from his outstretched hands, her heart breaking at his continued lies. "Don't make this worse by lying to me, Jacob. She talks about last night and how incredible you were together. She talks about being patient and making choices. How is that not what it looks like?" "Because I've never touched her." Jacob's voice cracked with desperation, tears streaming down his face. "Sophia, you have to believe me. I would never betray you, never betray our family. Something is wrong here, something I don't understand, but I swear to you on our daughter's life that I have been faithful to you." But Sophia was beyond hearing his protests. The evidence was right there in black and white, and her pregnant, hormone-addled brain couldn't process any explanation that didn't involve Jacob's betrayal. The man she had trusted with her heart, her body, her future, had proven himself to be a liar and a cheat. "I can't do this anymore," Sophia whispered, her hand protectively covering her belly. "I can't live with someone who lies to my face while betraying everything we built together." "Sophia, please," Jacob begged, falling to his knees before her. "Don't let a misunderstanding destroy us. We can figure this out together. I love you more than my own life. You and our baby are everything to me." "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this," Sophia replied, her voice breaking on the words. "If you loved our daughter, you wouldn't have planned to abandon us for another woman." She walked into their bedroom and began pulling clothes from the closet, her movements mechanical and determined despite her trembling hands. Jacob followed, watching in horror as she packed a suitcase with shaking fingers. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly, his voice defeated. "To my mother's. Don't follow me, Jacob, don't call me. I need time to think about what's best for our daughter." "Our daughter needs her father," Jacob said desperately, his voice raw with anguish. "Whatever you think I've done, whatever misunderstanding this is, please don't keep my child from me." Sophia paused in her packing, one hand on her belly. Despite everything, she didn't want to hurt Jacob or deprive their daughter of her father. But she couldn't bear the thought of sharing custody with a man who had betrayed her so completely. "We'll work something out," she said finally. "But I can't be married to you anymore. I can't trust you anymore." Jacob sank onto their bed, his head in his hands, as Sophia finished packing. When she was ready to leave, she paused at the bedroom door, looking back at the man she had loved so completely. "I would have forgiven almost anything," she said softly, her voice breaking with the weight of her grief. "If you had come to me and said you were unhappy, if you had asked for counseling, if you had been honest about your feelings, I would have fought for us. But lying to me while planning to leave me for another woman, that's something I can never forgive." Jacob looked up at her with eyes full of agony and confusion, his face streaked with tears. "Sophia, I swear to you, I don't know what that message means, but I know what's in my heart. You and our daughter are my entire world. Please don't leave me." But Sophia was already walking away, her suitcase in one hand and her shattered heart in the other. As the elevator doors closed between them, she saw Jacob collapse against the doorframe, his face a mask of devastation that might have moved her if she hadn't been so completely broken herself. In the taxi to her mother's house, Sophia felt their daughter kicking frantically, as if sensing her mother's distress. Sophia placed both hands on her belly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "It's going to be okay, my love. Mommy will take care of you. We'll be okay without him." But even as she said the words, Sophia wondered if either of them would ever truly be okay again, or if the love that had once felt like destiny was really just an illusion that had finally been shattered by the cruel light of truth. Chapter 5. When Love Becomes Goodbye. The Cruelest truth about broken hearts is that they keep beating, forcing you to live through each agonizing moment when all you want is for the pain to stop. Sophia stood in her childhood bedroom at her mother's house. Surrounded by the remnants of the life she had built with Jacob, the room felt like a time capsule, decorated with the hopes and dreams of a younger version of herself who had believed in fairy tale endings. Now, at 24 and 7 months pregnant, she felt ancient and hollow, as if the woman who had danced under stars and believed in forever had died in that Manhattan penthouse. Rose Beaumont watched her daughter with the helpless ache that only a mother can feel when her child is suffering beyond reach. Sophia had arrived 3 days ago with red-rimmed eyes and a suitcase. Her explanation of Jacob's betrayal delivered in a voice so flat and lifeless that Rose barely recognized the vibrant young woman who had left home so full of hope and love. "Sweetheart, you need to eat something," Rose said gently, bringing a tray of soup and crackers to Sophia's bedside. "The baby needs nourishment, even if you don't feel like taking care of yourself." Sophia looked down at her swollen belly with a mixture of love and despair that broke her mother's heart. Their daughter, Chloe, the name they had chosen together in happier times, deserved so much better than this broken beginning. She deserved parents who loved each other, a father who would be there for every milestone, a family that wasn't shattered before she even drew her first breath. "I keep thinking about the nursery we decorated," Sophia whispered, her hand absently stroking her belly as tears slipped down her cheeks. "We spent hours picking out the perfect shade of yellow, debating whether the crib should go by the window or the wall. Jacob was so excited about being a father. He kept talking about teaching her to ride bikes and helping her with homework. How could he plan to leave us?" Rose sat on the edge of the bed, her heart breaking for her daughter's pain. Men can be foolish, especially when they're scared. Having a baby changes everything, and sometimes they panic and make terrible choices. "This wasn't panic, Mom. This was calculated betrayal." Sophia's voice was hollow, drained of all emotion. Vivian's message talked about being patient, about waiting for him to make a choice. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown affair that had been going on for who knows how long. The phone rang downstairs, and both women tensed. Jacob had been calling constantly since Sophia left, leaving voicemails that ranged from desperate pleas to confused denials. Sophia had listened to the first few, but hearing his voice only made the pain worse, like reopening a wound that was trying to heal. "I should probably answer it," Rose said reluctantly. "He's worried about you and the baby, sweetheart. Whatever he's done, he does love you both. If he loved us, he wouldn't have done this," Sophia replied automatically, though the words felt like reciting a lesson she was trying to make herself believe. Rose returned 20 minutes later, her expression troubled and sad. "Sophia, honey, I think you should consider talking to him. He sounds... desperate isn't the right word. He sounds genuinely confused, like he truly doesn't understand what happened." "Of course he sounds confused," Sophia said bitterly, though her voice lacked conviction. "He got caught. He probably never expected me to find that message. But what if... Mom, please!" Sophia's voice cracked with exhaustion and heartbreak. "I can't keep hoping this is all some terrible misunderstanding. I saw the message. I know what I read. Jacob has made his choice, and now I have to make mine." That evening, as Sophia sat in the garden where she had played as a child, she felt the familiar flutter of Chloe's movements, stronger now, more insistent, as if their daughter was trying to communicate something important. Sophia closed her eyes and tried to imagine what their future would look like, just the two of them, building a life from the ashes of her broken marriage. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Reynolds, Jacob's best friend and business partner. The message was brief but pointed. "Sophia, please call me. Jacob is falling apart. Whatever happened, we can fix this. He loves you more than life itself." But Sophia deleted the message without responding. There was no fixing this kind of betrayal, no going back to the innocence they had lost. She thought about the last time she had seen Jacob collapsed against their doorframe as she walked away. The image haunted her, but not enough to change her mind about what she had to do. 3 weeks later, Sophia went into premature labor during a thunderstorm that seemed to mirror the chaos in her heart. Rose drove her to the hospital through sheets of rain, while Sophia breathed through contractions that felt like her body was trying to tear itself apart from the inside. "Everything's going to be all right," Rose kept saying, her knuckles white on the steering wheel as lightning illuminated the sky. "Babies born at 34 weeks do beautifully these days. She's going to be perfect." Sophia nodded, unable to speak through the pain that seemed to encompass more than just the physical. Part of her wanted to call Jacob, wanted him there to hold her hand and coach her through the birth of their daughter. But the larger part of her couldn't bear the thought of seeing him, of having him witness this miracle when he had already chosen another woman to share his life with. Chloe Morris entered the world at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, weighing 5 pounds and 2 ounces. Despite being premature, she was perfect, tiny but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with curious intelligence. When the doctor placed her in Sophia's arms, the love that flooded through her was so intense it took her breath away and made her forget, for just a moment, that her heart was broken. "Hello, my beautiful girl," Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she studied her daughter's perfect features. "Mommy loves you so much, more than anything in this world." Chloe's eyes seemed to focus on Sophia's face, and in that moment, Sophia felt a fierce protectiveness rise within her like a lioness defending her cub. This precious little person was depending on her, trusting her to create a safe and loving world. Sophia would move mountains before she let anyone hurt her daughter the way she had been hurt. "Should I call Jacob?" Rose asked softly from beside the hospital bed, her voice careful and gentle. Sophia looked down at Chloe's perfect face and made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. "No, not yet. I need time to figure out how to do this. Sophia, she's safe and healthy. That's all he needs to know right now." Sophia's voice was firm, but Rose could hear the uncertainty underneath. Rose looked troubled, but didn't argue. Sophia was exhausted and emotional, still processing the trauma of the last month while dealing with the intensity of new motherhood. Perhaps in a few days, when the shock wore off and the reality of single parenthood set in, she would be ready to include Jacob in their daughter's life. But days turned into weeks, and Sophia found herself unable to make that call. Every time she picked up the phone, she remembered Vivian's message, the casual way she had talked about waiting for Jacob to make his choice. How could Sophia trust him with their daughter's heart when he had so carelessly broken her own? Meanwhile, Jacob was going through his own private hell. The misunderstanding that had destroyed his marriage was eating him alive. But without Sophia there to hear his explanations, he had no way to prove his innocence. He hired 3 different private investigators over the following months, each one hitting the same frustrating dead ends. "Mr. Morris, I've traced every communication, checked every hotel record, interviewed every witness," Detective Morrison reported during their final meeting, his voice professional but sympathetic. "There's no evidence of any relationship between you and Ms. Sterling. In fact, she seems to have left the city entirely the day after your wife departed." "That's convenient," Jacob said bitterly, staring at the thick file of investigative reports. "Almost too convenient. But without her cooperation or physical evidence, there's nothing more I can do. I'm sorry, Mr. Morris." Jacob stared at the investigator's report, pages of meticulous work that proved nothing except that Vivian Sterling had vanished like smoke. His attempts to contact her family yielded only cold responses that they had no knowledge of her whereabouts and did not wish to be involved in personal disputes. David found Jacob in his office one evening, staring out at the city lights with a bottle of whiskey and a legal document on his desk. "What's that?" David asked, though he feared he already knew. "Divorce papers," Jacob replied, his voice hollow and lifeless. "Sophia's lawyer sent them today. She wants nothing from me. No alimony, no property settlement. She just wants out of this marriage. And the baby." Jacob's hand tightened around his glass, his knuckles white with tension. "Chloe was born 3 weeks ago. 5 pounds 2 ounces, healthy despite being premature. I found out from a private investigator I hired to make sure they were safe." David sank into the chair across from Jacob's desk, genuine shock on his face. "You hired a PI to spy on your own wife?" "Ex-wife," Jacob corrected bitterly. "And I wasn't spying. I just needed to know that they were okay. Sophia won't take my calls, won't see me, won't let me be part of this. I have a daughter I've never held, and I don't even know if I ever will." "Fight for custody," David said quietly. "Fight for your daughter." Jacob looked at his friend with eyes full of pain and confusion. "How can I fight for custody when I don't even understand what happened? How can I prove I'm innocent of something when I don't know what evidence destroyed my marriage? Then figure it out. Hire more investigators, trace phone records, do whatever it takes. But don't give up on your family." Jacob stared at the divorce papers for a long moment, then picked up his pen. His signature was a jagged slash across the bottom of the page, legally ending the greatest love story he had ever known. 3 months later, a custody agreement was reached through their lawyers. Jacob would have visitation rights with Chloe, supervised at first until she was older. Child support would be paid directly to an account in Chloe's name. Sophia would retain primary custody, and both parties agreed to minimal contact to avoid further emotional trauma. The first time Jacob saw his daughter, she was 4 months old and had Sophia's eyes but his stubborn chin. He held her in the sterile visitation room, while a social worker watched from the corner and felt his heart break all over again. This beautiful little girl would grow up thinking her father had abandoned her, never knowing how desperately he had wanted to be part of her life. "Hello, Chloe," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears as he marveled at her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. "Daddy loves you so much. I'm going to find a way to prove that to you someday. I'm going to find the truth, and when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you everything." Chloe looked up at him with curious eyes, and Jacob could swear she smiled. It was probably just gas, but he chose to believe it was recognition, some genetic memory that told her she was safe in her father's arms, that he would never willingly leave her. As Sophia watched from the hallway through the window, she felt her resolve waver for the first time in months. Jacob looked broken, defeated, and the love in his eyes as he looked at their daughter was unmistakable and pure. For a moment she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake, if her hurt and hormones had led her to destroy something precious. But then she remembered Vivian's message, the casual cruelty of a woman who had been patient while waiting for Jacob to choose her, and she hardened her heart once again. Some betrayals were too deep to forgive, some trust too broken to repair. What neither Sophia nor Jacob knew was that their love story was far from over, and that 20 years later, their daughter would be the key to bringing them back together and revealing the truth that had been hidden from them both. Chapter 6. 20 Years of Silence. Time has a way of both, healing wounds and making them permanent, carving scars so deep they become part of who we are. 20 years had passed since Sophia walked away from Jacob Morris, taking their unborn daughter and his heart with her. In those decades, both had built new lives from the ashes of their broken marriage, each carrying secrets and regrets that shaped every choice thereafter. Sophia Beaumont, she had reclaimed her maiden name the day the divorce was finalized, stood in her elegant Manhattan office, surveying the empire she had built with determination and will. Beaumont wedding planning had become the city's most sought-after service, creating fairy tale celebrations for couples who still believed in happily ever after. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had become an expert in orchestrating perfect weddings when her own marriage had ended in devastating failure. Last month, She had planned a wedding for a young couple who reminded her painfully of herself and Jacob. The bride had looked at her groom with such pure adoration that Sophia had excused herself to cry. Watching them exchange vows in a garden ceremony, Sophia had unconsciously touched the thin gold chain around her neck where her wedding ring hung, a secret she had kept for 20 years. "The Pemberton wedding is confirmed for next month," Lily Warren announced, entering with contracts. Her business partner had watched Sophia transform from a broken young mother into one of New York's most successful entrepreneurs. "They want the ceremony in the same garden where Jacob and I first met," Sophia finished quietly. "Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor." Through her office windows, Sophia could see Central Park in autumn glory. 20 years ago, she had walked those paths as a young mother, pushing Chloe's stroller and wondering how she would build a life for them both. Across town, Jacob Morris sat in his corner office atop the Morris Industries building, the empire now expanded into a global corporation worth billions. The view encompassed most of Manhattan, but Jacob's attention was focused on the single photograph on his desk, Chloe at her high school graduation, standing between her parents, who maintained careful distance. Last week, he had attended a charity gala, the same annual event where he and Sophia had first met. Standing in that moonlit garden, he had been transported back 25 years. A beautiful woman had approached him, clearly interested. "I'm sorry," he had said gently, "but I'm not available." "Married?" she had asked. "In love," Jacob had replied simply. "Still, always." At 45, Jacob had achieved everything his father had dreamed of and more. Morris Industries was respected globally. He owned homes in 3 countries and had been named one of the city's most eligible bachelors countless times. Yet none of it meant anything without the family he had lost. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes, David Reynolds announced, entering Jacob's office. As COO, David had been instrumental in building the company's success. But more importantly, he had remained Jacob's closest friend through the darkest period, or so Jacob believed. "David, do you think I should have fought harder? Should I have refused to sign the divorce papers?" David had heard this question countless times, his answer always designed to keep Jacob from digging deeper. "You did everything you could. You hired investigators, traced that message, turned the city upside down. Sometimes the truth isn't enough if the other person isn't ready to hear it. But what if I missed something? What if there was a way to prove what really happened?" The woman who disappeared without a trace 3 days after Sophia left, whose family claimed not to know where she had gone. David's voice hid the knowledge that he knew exactly where Vivian Sterling had gone and why. "You drove yourself nearly insane trying to solve that mystery." Jacob turned to the window, 20 years of stress mapped in the lines around his eyes. The Jacob Morris, who had danced with Sophia in moonlit gardens, was gone, replaced by a successful but solitary man who had never learned to trust his heart again. "I'm having lunch with Chloe today," Jacob said. "She's been hinting that Sophia is working on the Pemberton wedding, the Pemberton estate, where you and Sophia first met. Sometimes I wonder if she chose that job deliberately." Jacob knew David was probably right about moving on, but hope was stubborn. Even after 20 years, he found himself looking for signs that Sophia might be ready to hear his side of the story. That afternoon, father and daughter sat in their usual bistro, maintaining the careful choreography they had perfected. Jacob asked about her studies. Chloe answered with warmth tempered by reserve. "I'm thinking about pediatric cardiology," Chloe mentioned. "Something about helping children appeals to me." Jacob smiled, remembering Sophia's passion for teaching. "Your mother always said you had her heart for helping people." "She talks about you sometimes," Chloe said suddenly. "I catch her looking at old photos or touching that necklace she always wears." Jacob's heart stopped. "Hi, what necklace?" "A thin gold chain. She never takes it off. Sometimes when she thinks no one is looking, she touches it like it's precious." Sophia's wedding ring, the thought that she might wear it close to her heart even now, was almost too much to bear. "Dad, what really happened between you and Mom?" Chloe asked quietly. "I'm not a child anymore." Jacob looked at his daughter, this beautiful, intelligent young woman who carried the best of both her parents, and felt the familiar weight of a truth he had never been able to prove. "Your mother and I loved each other very much," Jacob said carefully. "But sometimes, even when people love each other deeply, misunderstandings can grow too big to overcome. What matters is that we both love you more than life itself. Do you still love her?" The question hung between them like a bridge Jacob wasn't sure he should cross. But looking at his daughter's earnest face, he found he couldn't lie. "Every day," he whispered. "Every single day for 20 years. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then maybe it's time to try again. Life's too short to spend it regretting the past." As Jacob walked back to his office, Chloe's words echoed in his mind. 20 years was a long time to carry regret, but it was also a long time for wounds to heal. Maybe his daughter was right. What Jacob didn't know was that fate was preparing to make that choice for him, in the form of a medical emergency that would force him and Sophia back into each other's lives. And in that crucible of fear and love, the truth that had been hidden for 20 years would finally come to light. In her apartment, Chloe sat studying, unaware that she carried within her a genetic condition that would soon bring her parents faced with the realization that some loves are too powerful to stay buried forever. Chapter 7. When Heaven Calls for Help. Some calls shatter your world so completely that you measure your life in before and after, and nothing is ever the same again. Chloe Morris had always been the picture of health, vibrant, energetic, the kind of young woman who ran 5 miles every morning before her first anatomy class, and still had energy to volunteer at the children's hospital on weekends. Her roommates often joked that she had more energy than a caffeinated hummingbird, her enthusiasm for life infectious to everyone around her. So when she collapsed during her advanced physiology lecture on a crisp October morning, her classmates initially thought she had simply pushed herself too hard again. Chloe, can you hear me?" Professor Martinez knelt beside her unconscious form while another student called 911, his voice tight with concern. The 19-year-old's face was pale as porcelain, her breathing shallow and irregular, her usually vibrant presence suddenly fragile and frightening. By the time the paramedics arrived, Chloe was conscious but disoriented, complaining of severe fatigue and a crushing headache that felt like her skull was being split apart from the inside. The ride to Mount Sinai Hospital passed in a blur of sirens and medical jargon that she couldn't quite grasp through the fog of pain and confusion. Sophia was in the middle of a consultation with a nervous bride, helping her choose between ivory and champagne ribbon for her bouquet, when her phone rang with the call that would change everything. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something deep in her maternal instincts compelled her to answer. "Ms. Beaumont, this is Dr. Amanda Pierce at Mount Sinai Hospital. Your daughter Chloe has been admitted to our emergency department. You need to come immediately." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs and making her knees buckle. Her perfect, healthy daughter, the center of her universe, the light of her life, the only thing that had kept her going through 20 years of loneliness, was in the hospital. "What happened? Is she okay? How bad is it?" Sophia's voice came out in a rush of panic and fear. "I can't discuss details over the phone, but she's conscious and stable. Please come, as soon as you can." Sophia's hands shook so badly she could barely grip her car keys as she raced through Manhattan traffic, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios and desperate prayers to a God she wasn't sure she still believed in. She broke every speed limit, ran 3 red lights, and probably violated a dozen traffic laws. But all she could think about was getting to her daughter. She found Chloe in the emergency room, looking impossibly young and fragile in the hospital gown, connected to monitors that beeped ominously in the sterile air. Sophia's knees nearly buckled with relief when Chloe opened her eyes and managed a weak smile that was so like Jacob's, it made Sophia's heart clench. "Mom, I'm okay," Chloe said, though her voice was weaker than Sophia had ever heard it. "I just fainted during lecture." "They're being overly cautious. You know how doctors are." But Dr. Pierce's expression when she entered the room suggested otherwise. A tall, serious woman in her 50s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, she had the bearing of someone who delivered difficult news with compassion, but never sugar-coated the truth. "Ms. Beaumont, we need to talk privately," Dr. Pierce said gently, leading Sophia to a small consultation room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs as she followed, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. "What's going on? What's wrong with my daughter?" "The initial blood work shows some concerning abnormalities," Dr. Pierce said carefully, consulting her charts. "Chloe's white blood cell count is severely elevated, and her hemoglobin levels are dangerously low. We're running more comprehensive tests, but the preliminary results suggest a form of leukemia." The word leukemia hit Sophia like a sledgehammer to the chest. Her beautiful, brilliant daughter, the child she had raised alone, protected fiercely, loved beyond measure, had cancer. "There has to be a mistake," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible as the room seemed to spin around her. "She's so healthy. She runs every day. She eats well. She's never even had a serious cold. This can't be happening." "I understand this is shocking," Dr. Pierce said softly, her professional compassion evident. "Unfortunately, this type of leukemia often presents this way, seemingly sudden onset in otherwise healthy young adults. The good news is that if caught early, the treatment success rate is quite high." "What kind of treatment? Chemotherapy? Radiation? How long? How bad will it be?" Sophia's questions tumbled out in a rush of desperate need for information, for some sense of control in a situation that felt completely out of control. Both chemotherapy and radiation will likely be necessary, along with aggressive, supportive care. "But there's something else we need to discuss." Dr. Pierce hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "This particular genetic variant often requires a bone marrow transplant from a closely matched donor, usually a parent or sibling." Sophia's blood turned to ice in her veins. "I'll get tested immediately. Whatever Chloe needs, whatever it takes, she gets it." "Of course. But Ms. Beaumont, given the specific genetic markers we're seeing, it's possible that you might not be a match. We'll need to test both parents to find the best donor candidate." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sophia hadn't spoken to Jacob in over 3 years, their communication limited to formal exchanges through lawyers about Chloe's education and support. The thought of calling him, of hearing his voice, of needing something from the man who had shattered her heart 20 years ago was almost unbearable. But this was Chloe's life. This was her daughter, her everything, and she would do anything, even face Jacob Morris again, to save her. "How long do we have?" Sophia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "The tests will take 48 hours. If treatment is needed, we should begin within the week for optimal outcomes." Sophia nodded numbly, her mind already racing through the logistics of a conversation she had prayed she would never need to have. She returned to Chloe's room to find her daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that her entire future hung in the balance of a phone call her mother was terrified to make. That evening, Sophia sat in her apartment holding her phone, Jacob's number on the screen for the first time in years. Her hands trembled as 20 years of buried emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Pride, hurt, anger, and underneath it all, the stubborn remnant of love that she had never quite managed to kill. She thought about the young woman lying in that hospital bed. Their daughter, the best of both of them, the living proof that their love had once been real and beautiful and worth everything. Whatever had happened between her and Jacob, whatever betrayals had torn them apart, none of it mattered now. Only Chloe mattered. Sophia pressed the call button before she could lose her nerve. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Sophia almost hung up, but on the 4th ring, Jacob's voice filled her ear for the first time in years. "Hello?" He sounded older, wearier, but still unmistakably the man she had once loved more than her own life. Sophia's throat constricted, making it difficult to speak past the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Jacob, it's Sophia." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia could hear Jacob's sharp intake of breath, could almost see him sitting straighter in whatever chair he occupied, his world shifting just as hers had when she'd heard his voice. "Sophia, is everything all right? Is Chloe okay?" Even after 20 years of silence, his first concern was for their daughter, and despite everything, that knowledge sent a warm flutter through Sophia's chest. "Jacob, I need you to sit down. It's about Chloe, and it's serious. Tell me." His voice was sharp with fear and parental instinct, cutting through 2 decades of hurt and distance. "She collapsed at school today. She's at Mount Sinai. The doctors think she has leukemia." The words tumbled out in a rush, followed by silence so complete that Sophia wondered if the call had been dropped. When Jacob spoke again, his voice was raw with emotion and barely controlled panic. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Jacob, wait. There's more." Sophia's voice cracked with the weight of what she was about to ask. "The specific type of leukemia she has might require a bone marrow transplant from a parent. They need to test both of us to see who's a better match. Whatever she needs," Jacob said without hesitation. And Sophia could hear him already moving, already putting on his coat, already becoming the father Chloe needed. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, she gets it, everything, anything." "Can you meet me at the hospital? Dr. Pierce wants to explain everything to both of us together." "I'm already in my car," Jacob said, and Sophia could hear the slam of a door, the roar of an engine. "Sophia." "Thank you for calling me, for including me. I know this can't be easy for you." "This isn't about us, Jacob," Sophia said quietly, though her heart was pounding at the sound of her name on his lips. "This is about our daughter." "I know," he said softly. "But Sophia, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful you called." The line went dead, leaving Sophia alone with the magnitude of what she had just done. After 20 years of careful avoidance, she had just invited Jacob Morris back into her life. She thought about the wedding ring hanging around her neck, about the love she had tried so hard to bury, about the fact that in a few minutes she would see the only man she had ever truly loved. As Sophia gathered her purse and coat to return to the hospital, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. At 43, she was still beautiful, her features refined by maturity and success. But her eyes held the same fear and vulnerability they had carried 20 years ago when she was a scared young mother trying to protect her unborn child. The difference now was that she was no longer protecting Chloe from Jacob. She was preparing to entrust their daughter's life to the man she had once believed capable of, abandoning them both. 20 minutes later, Sophia stood in the hospital corridor, watching Jacob Morris stride toward her, and felt her carefully constructed world shift off its axis. He was still devastatingly handsome, his dark hair now silver at the temples, his face lined with the weight of 2 decades, but still unmistakably the man who had once danced with her under stars and promised her forever. When he reached her, they stood frozen for a moment, 2 people who had shared the deepest love and the most profound heartbreak, now brought together by the only thing more powerful than their past, their love for their daughter. "How is she?" Jacob asked, his voice rough with emotion and barely contained fear. "Scared, but trying to be brave," Sophia replied, her own voice trembling. "She doesn't know how serious it is yet." Jacob nodded, his jaw tight with the effort of maintaining control. "What do the doctors need from us?" As they walked toward Dr. Pierce's office side by side, maintaining careful distance despite the gravity of the situation, Neither could have predicted that their daughter's illness would become the key to unlocking 20 years of buried truth and discovering that some loves are strong enough to survive anything, even the cruelest lies designed to destroy them. Chapter 8. When yesterday meets today, sometimes, the universe forces us back to the people we've tried hardest to forget, and we discover that time has changed everything except the one thing that matters most. The consultation room at Mount Sinai felt impossibly small, with Jacob's presence filling it like a living force. Sophia sat rigidly in her chair, acutely aware of every breath he took, every slight movement, the familiar scent of his cologne that still made her pulse quicken, despite 20 years of trying to forget it. Jacob appeared equally affected, his usually perfect composure cracked by the emotional storm of seeing his ex-wife while grappling with their daughter's diagnosis. Dr. Pierce entered with a thick file and the grave expression that Sophia was beginning to dread, her professional demeanor providing a stark contrast to the emotional chaos in the room. "Thank you both for coming so quickly. I know this situation is complicated for your family," Dr. Pierce said gently, settling into her chair across from them. "Our daughter's health is the only thing that matters," Jacob said firmly, his voice steady despite the tremor Sophia could detect underneath. "What exactly are we dealing with?" "The tests confirm acute lymphoblastic leukemia with a rare genetic variant called Philadelphia chromosome-positive ALL. It's aggressive but treatable with the right protocol." Dr. Pierce opened the file, revealing charts and lab results that looked like hieroglyphics to Sophia. "The challenge is that this particular variant often requires a bone marrow transplant for optimal outcomes." Sophia felt Jacob's sharp intake of breath beside her, saw his hands clench into fists on his knees. "What are the odds of finding a compatible donor within our family?" "With parents, there's approximately a 25% chance that either of you will be a suitable match. If neither of you match, we'll search the National Registry, but that could take months, time we may not have." "How long can she wait?" Sophia asked, her voice barely steady as she tried to process the clinical language that held her daughter's life in the balance. "We can begin chemotherapy immediately to slow the progression. But ideally, we'd want to proceed with transplant within 8 weeks for the best prognosis." Jacob leaned forward, his business-trained mind cutting through the emotion to focus on actionable information. "What do you need from us to determine compatibility?" "Doodle, blood samples from both parents, processed through a specialized lab. Results in 48 hours. Dr. Pierce studied both of them carefully, noting the careful distance they maintained, the tension that crackled between them like electricity. "I should mention that this process will require extensive coordination between the donor and Chloe. We're talking about weeks of preparation, the procedure itself, and months of recovery. The donor parent will need to be available and committed throughout. Whatever it takes," Jacob said without hesitation, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "Anything she needs," Sophia echoed, feeling a flash of the old unity they had once shared, the way they had always been perfectly aligned when it came to protecting the people they loved. After the medical consultation, they walked silently toward Chloe's room, the weight of the situation creating an odd bubble of forced intimacy. Other families passed them in the corridor, worried parents clutching coffee cups, elderly couples supporting each other through another crisis, children with balloons visiting recovering relatives. Jacob and Sophia looked like any other concerned parents, but the careful space they maintained between them told a different story. "She doesn't know how serious it is yet," Sophia said quietly as they approached the room. "I thought we should tell her together. She's always wanted—" Sophia's voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that would reveal too much about their daughter's deepest wishes. Jacob stopped walking, his expression unreadable but intense. "Thank you for including me. I know this can't be easy for you, and I'm grateful that you're putting Chloe first." Sophia met his eyes for the first time that day, and for a moment, 20 years collapsed into nothing. She saw the young man who had danced with her under stars, who had cried when she told him about her pregnancy, who had looked at their newborn daughter with such overwhelming love during those brief, supervised visits. Then reality crashed back, and she remembered why they were strangers now. "This isn't about us, Jacob," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "This is about Chloe." "I know," he said softly, his green eyes holding depths of pain and regret. "But Sophia, don't." Her voice was sharper than she intended, a defense mechanism honed by 20 years of protecting herself from exactly this moment. "Please, I can't. Not now, not with everything that's happening." Jacob nodded, understanding that this fragile truce was all she could offer. They entered Chloe's room to find her sitting up in bed, looking more like herself, despite the hospital gown and IV line, her spirit too strong to be diminished by something as mundane as illness. "Dad!" Chloe's face lit up when she saw Jacob, and Sophia felt her heart twist at the pure joy in her daughter's voice. "Mom said you were coming?" "This is silly, isn't it? All this fuss over a fainting spell." Sophia and Jacob exchanged a glance, and in that moment they were united in their shared desire to protect their daughter from a truth that would terrify her. The look that passed between them was loaded with 20 years of unspoken communication, the kind of parental telepathy that transcends even the deepest hurts. "Sweetheart," Sophia began carefully, moving to sit on one side of the bed. "The doctors want to run some more tests. It might not be just exhaustion." Chloe's smile faded as she read the expressions on her parents' faces, her pre-med training helping her interpret their carefully controlled fear. "What kind of tests? You both look like someone died." Jacob moved to her bedside, his paternal instincts overriding 20 years of careful distance from Sophia. "Chloe, the blood work showed some irregularities. The doctors think you might have a condition that will require treatment." "What kind of condition?" Chloe's voice was smaller now, young and scared in a way that broke both her parents' hearts. Sophia took Chloe's hand, squeezing gently. "Leukemia, sweetheart. A type of blood cancer, but it's very treatable, especially in someone young and strong like you." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Chloe's face went pale, and for a moment she looked exactly like the frightened little girl who used to crawl into Sophia's bed during thunderstorms. "Cancer?" Chloe whispered, the word seeming too big for her to comprehend. "But I feel fine. I mean tired, but fine." "That's how this type often presents," Jacob said gently, sitting on the other side of the bed so that their daughter was surrounded by both parents for the first time in years. "The good news is that it's very treatable, especially when caught early like this." "What kind of treatment?" Chloe asked, her analytical mind engaging even as her emotional side reeled from the diagnosis. "Chemotherapy. Possibly radiation and maybe a bone marrow transplant," Sophia explained, her voice steady despite the terror she felt inside. "Dad and I are getting tested to see if either of us can be a donor." Chloe looked back and forth between her parents, and something shifted in her expression. Despite the fear and shock, there was a spark of something that looked almost like hope, as if, even in this terrible moment, she could see the possibility of something she had wanted her entire life. "You're both going to be here? Through all of this?" The question was loaded with 20 years of longing for her parents to be in the same room, to act like the family she had always dreamed of having. Sophia and Jacob exchanged another glance, this one heavy with unspoken implications. Their daughter was asking for something they hadn't done in 20 years. Act like a united front, like parents who could work together for their child's sake. "We'll both be here," Jacob said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. "Whatever you need, however long it takes, we're not going anywhere." "Every step of the way," Sophia added. meaning it completely despite the emotional chaos of being near Jacob again. Over the next 2 days, as they waited for the compatibility test results, Jacob and Sophia fell into an awkward routine of tag team vigils. They avoided being alone together, communicating through Chloe or the medical staff, maintaining the careful distance that had defined their relationship for 2 decades. But their daughter was having none of it. "This is ridiculous," Chloe announced on the second evening, as Sophia prepared to leave for the night shift change, her voice carrying a strength that reminded both parents that she was no longer the child they remembered. "You're my parents. You're going to have to actually talk to each other if one of you is going to be my donor." "Chloe," Sophia began, but her daughter held up a hand. "No, Mom. I'm 19 years old, I'm in pre-med, and I have cancer. I think I can handle the truth about whatever happened between you and Dad 20 years ago." Chloe's voice carried a maturity that reminded both parents she was no longer a child. "I've spent my entire life watching you two dance around each other like polite strangers, and I'm tired of it." Jacob spoke carefully, his voice gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, some things are complicated." "Nothing is more complicated than what we're facing right now," Chloe interrupted, her eyes flashing with determination. "I need my parents, both of them, not two people who can barely be in the same room together." Sophia felt tears threatening and turned toward the window to compose herself. In the reflection, she could see Jacob watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read: concern, longing, and something that might have been hope. "Your mom and I will figure out how to work together," Jacob said quietly, his words directed at Chloe but his eyes on Sophia's reflection. "Your health is all that matters now." "Good," Chloe said, settling back against her pillows with satisfaction. "Because Dr. Pierce said she'd have the test results tomorrow morning, and whoever's the match is going to need to start preparation immediately." That night, Sophia lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the emotional whiplash of the last few days. Having Jacob back in her life, even under these circumstances, was stirring up feelings she had thought buried forever. The way he looked at Chloe with such fierce love, the careful consideration he showed for Sophia's feelings despite her coldness toward him, the familiar way he ran his hand through his hair when he was stressed. It was all exactly the same as it had been 20 years ago. But 20 years of hurt and resentment weren't easily overcome, even in the face of their daughter's illness. Sophia touched the wedding ring hanging around her neck and wondered if she had the strength to let down her guard enough to help Chloe heal, knowing it might require healing herself in the process. The next morning, Dr. Pierce called them both to her office with the test results that would determine their daughter's future. Sophia and Jacob sat in the same chairs they had occupied 3 days earlier, but the dynamic between them had shifted slightly. They were still careful with each other, but the shared focus on Chloe's welfare had created the first crack in the wall that separated them. "I have good news," Dr. Pierce began, and both parents let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. "Jacob, you're a perfect match. 6 out of 6 genetic markers align perfectly with Chloe's. It's actually quite remarkable. We don't often see compatibility this exact." Sophia felt a complex mix of relief and something that might have been jealousy. Of course, Jacob would be the one to save their daughter. Of course, he would be the hero in this story, just as he had tried to be in their marriage before everything fell apart. "What does that mean for the timeline?" Jacob asked, all business despite the emotion Sophia could see him fighting to control. "We can begin your preparation immediately. The process involves several weeks of injections to stimulate your bone marrow production, followed by the extraction procedure, then Chloe's treatment and transplant. You'll need to be available full-time for approximately 3 months. "Done," Jacob said without hesitation, and Sophia saw the same determination in his eyes that had made her fall in love with him all those years ago. "There's one more thing," Dr. Pierce continued, her expression becoming even more serious. The psychological component of this process is significant. Families that maintain strong emotional support systems throughout treatment have dramatically better outcomes. I strongly recommend family counseling to help you all navigate this together. Sophia's stomach dropped. Family counseling meant confronting 20 years of buried pain while trying to save their daughter's life. It meant being in the same room as Jacob for hours at a time, talking about feelings in the past and all the reasons why they had failed each other. But it also meant giving Chloe the best possible chance at recovery. "Whatever helps our daughter," Sophia said quietly, meeting Jacob's eyes across the small office for the first time since she'd called him. "Whatever it takes," Jacob agreed. And for the first time in 20 years, they were completely united in their purpose. As they walked toward Chloe's room to share the good news, Sophia felt the first flutter of something she hadn't experienced in decades: hope. Not for herself and Jacob, but for the possibility that their family, broken as it was, might find a way to heal together. What she didn't know was that the next 3 months would force her to confront not only her fears about Chloe's recovery, but the truth about what had really destroyed her marriage all those years ago. Chapter 9. Truths Unveiled. The most dangerous truths are often the ones we've protected ourselves from knowing, because once revealed, they don't just change our understanding, they rewrite our entire history. 3 weeks into Jacob's bone marrow preparation, the hospital had become their second home, a sterile sanctuary where their broken family was slowly learning to function together again. Sophia had temporarily relocated her business operations to function remotely, while Jacob had handed day-to-day control of Morris Industries to David for the first time in decades, marking a seismic shift in his priorities that didn't go unnoticed. The family counseling sessions Dr. Pierce had recommended were being held in a small conference room overlooking the hospital's meditation garden, where Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a gentle woman in her 60s with silver hair and knowing eyes, had been guiding families through medical crises and emotional healing for over 30 years. "Today I'd like to explore the family dynamics that brought you to this point," Dr. Hartwell said during their third session, her voice calm and non-judgmental. Chloe, whose strength was steadily improving thanks to the preliminary treatments, sat between her parents on the small sofa, an unconscious bridge between two people who had spent 20 years avoiding emotional intimacy. "I think the dynamic is pretty clear," Chloe said, with the blunt honesty that had emerged since her diagnosis, her illness seeming to strip away any patience for pretense or politeness. "My parents loved each other desperately. Something terrible happened, and they've been too proud and hurt to fix it ever since." Sophia shifted uncomfortably, feeling exposed under her daughter's directness and the therapist's gentle but penetrating gaze. "Chloe, it's not that simple, isn't it?" Chloe turned to face her mother fully, her eyes bright with intelligence and determination. "Mom, I've seen the photo albums you think I don't know about. The ones hidden in your bedroom closet with pictures of you and Dad looking at each other like you hung the moon and stars. I've seen Dad's face when someone mentions your name at family dinners. He gets this look like someone just reached into his chest and squeezed his heart." Jacob's sharp intake of breath was audible in the small room. "Chloe, Dad, you've never even dated anyone seriously since the divorce. Neither has Mom. Two successful, attractive people who just happen to be completely unavailable to love anyone except each other. That's not coincidence, that's choice. You're both choosing to live half-lives because you're too scared to face whatever tore you apart." Dr. Hartwell leaned forward slightly, her professional instincts recognizing a breakthrough moment. "Jacob, Sophia, how does it feel to hear Chloe's perspective on your relationship?" Sophia stared at her hands, her wedding ring burning against her chest under her sweater like a brand of shame and longing. "It doesn't matter how we feel about each other. Some things can't be fixed. Some wounds are too deep." "What things?" Chloe pressed, her voice gentle but insistent. What could possibly be so terrible that it's worth 20 years of misery? 20 years of me growing up thinking I broke my parents' marriage by being born. You didn't break anything, both parents said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. Then what did? Chloe's voice was quiet now, vulnerable. Please, I need to understand. I need to know why my family fell apart. The silence stretched between them, heavy with secrets and old wounds that had never properly healed. Finally, Jacob spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Your mother believes I had an affair. Chloe's head snapped towards Sophia, her eyes wide with shock. Did he? There was a message, Sophia said quietly, her voice carrying 20 years of pain and betrayal. From another woman. Very explicit about their relationship, their feelings for each other, their plans for when he left me. I was 7 months pregnant and I found it on his phone. And you believed it? Chloe asked, turning back to Jacob with an expression of growing understanding. Dad, did you have an affair? Jacob met his daughter's eyes directly, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. No, I have never been unfaithful to your mother, not in thought or deed. But I could never prove that the message was a lie. Dr. Hartwell observed the triangle of emotions playing out before her, recognizing the classic pattern of miscommunication and misunderstanding that destroyed so many families. Sophia, what made the message convincing to you? Sophia's control finally cracked, 20 years of suppressed anguish spilling out like water from a broken dam. Because it made sense of everything else. Jacob was working constantly, staying out later and later, always exhausted when he came home. This woman, Vivian Sterling, was always at his business events, always positioning herself near him, always touching his arm and laughing at his jokes. When I tried to voice my concerns, he dismissed them as pregnancy paranoia. Because they were paranoia, Jacob said desperately, his own voice breaking with the weight of 20 years of misunderstood intentions. Sophia, I was working 18-hour days trying to prove myself worthy of taking over my father's company. I was terrified of becoming a father, terrified of failing you and our baby. I was an idiot who thought providing financially was the same as providing emotionally. Then explain the message, Sophia shot back, her voice raw with old pain. Explain how Vivian Sterling knew intimate details about your life, your schedule, your feelings. Explain how she could write about being patient and waiting for you to choose her if there was nothing between you. I can't, Jacob admitted, his voice breaking completely. That's what's driven me crazy for 20 years. I can't explain something I don't understand. I can't prove a negative. I can't make you believe in my innocence when the evidence against me seemed so clear. Chloe looked back and forth between her parents, her analytical mind processing this information with the same methodical approach she brought to her medical studies. Mom, do you still have the message? Sophia looked startled. What? The message that destroyed your marriage. Do you still have it? Sophia hesitated, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Yes, I screenshotted it before I confronted your father. I kept it all these years as a reminder of why I left, why I couldn't trust him. Can I see it? Chloe asked quietly, her voice gentle but determined. Sophia's hands shook as she navigated to a folder buried deep in her photo album, one she had never opened but never been able to delete. The screenshot was still there, as devastating as the day she had taken it. The words that had shattered her world, preserved in digital amber. Chloe studied the message carefully, her medical training and her generation's familiarity with technology giving her a different perspective than her mother had possessed 20 years ago. She examined every detail with the same intensity she brought to studying cellular structures under a microscope. Mom, look at the metadata on this message. The timestamp, the phone number it came from, the technical details. Sophia looked at the screen, seeing only the words that had destroyed her marriage. I don't understand what you're looking for. The message came from a phone number with a 312 area code. That's Chicago. Dad was in Chicago when you received this, right? Yes, but that proves he was with her. No, Chloe interrupted, her voice growing excited as the pieces clicked together. Look at the timestamp. The message was sent at 11:47 p.m. Central Time, but it shows on Dad's phone as being received at 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time. Jacob leaned over to look at the screen, his business mind immediately grasping what Chloe was suggesting. If someone in New York sent a message pretending to be in Chicago, they would need to manually adjust the timestamp. But if they made a mistake and used the wrong time zone, it would show up exactly like this. But that would mean... Sophia's voice trailed off as the implications hit her like a physical blow. It means someone in New York sent this message to Dad's phone, pretending to be Vivian Sterling in Chicago, Chloe continued, her voice gentle but insistent. Someone who had access to his phone long enough to send the message and then delete it from his sent folder, making it look like he had received it instead of sending it. Dr. Hartwell watched the revelation unfold with professional interest and personal satisfaction. Who would have had access to Jacob's phone? Any number of people, Jacob said slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. My assistant, business partners, anyone at the office or social events where I might have left it unattended. But who would have had a motive to destroy your marriage? Chloe pressed, her voice carrying the determination of someone who had inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's protective instincts. The room fell silent as all three minds worked through the possibilities. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice barely audible as a memory surfaced. Someone who wanted you for themselves. Jacob's face went white as memory crashed over him like a tide. David. What? Sophia looked confused, her mind struggling to process this new possibility. David Reynolds, my business partner and best friend. He had feelings for you, Sophia, before we met, actually. He asked you out once, remember? You turned him down for our first date. Jacob's voice grew stronger as the pieces fell into place. He was at every event where Vivian Sterling appeared. He had access to my phone, my schedule, my private conversations. He was the one who convinced me not to fight harder for you after you left. Sophia's memory slowly shifted into focus. 20 years of interactions recontextualizing themselves in this new light. David Reynolds, Jacob's charming best friend, who had always been just a little too attentive to her, who had access to Jacob's entire life, who had been there for every milestone and every crisis. But David was your best friend, Sophia protested, though her voice lacked conviction. He was your best man at our wedding. He helped you through the divorce. Why would he want to destroy your happiness? Because he never got over wanting what Jacob had, Chloe said quietly, her young mind grasping the psychology with frightening clarity. Dad, think about it. Who convinced you not to fight harder for Mom after she left? Who had access to your communications with the investigators you hired? Who would have known exactly how to manipulate both of you? Jacob's face was a mask of growing horror and understanding. He always asked about you after the divorce. 20 years of casual questions about how you were doing, whether you were dating anyone, suggesting that maybe I should move on and stop hoping for reconciliation. And he was the one who told you Vivian Sterling had disappeared, Sophia added, the pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. How convenient that the one person who could have explained the message vanished without a trace. He made sure I could never prove my innocence, Jacob whispered, his voice hollow with the weight of 20 years of manipulation. He destroyed our marriage and then spent 2 decades keeping us apart. The silence that followed was deafening. 20 years of pain, 20 years of lost time. 20 years of a family torn apart by the jealousy and manipulation of someone they had trusted completely. I have to confront him, Jacob said suddenly, reaching for his phone with shaking hands, his face dark with 20 years of suppressed rage. Dad, wait! Chloe placed her hand over his, her voice calm but firm. You can't prove any of this. David's too smart to have left evidence after 20 years. He's had decades to cover his tracks. Then what do we do? Sophia asked, her voice hollow with shock and a grief so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. How do we live with knowing that our entire marriage was destroyed by someone we trusted? We focus on what matters now, Chloe said firmly, looking back and forth between her parents with wisdom beyond her years. We focus on our family. We focus on healing. We focus on not letting David Reynolds steal one more moment of our lives. Sophia looked at Jacob across their daughter's hospital bed, seeing him clearly for the first time in 20 years. The man she had loved, had married, had created a life with. He was exactly who she had always believed him to be. The betrayal that had destroyed their marriage was real, but it hadn't come from him. Jacob, she whispered. His name, feeling foreign and familiar on her lips simultaneously, like a prayer in a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Sophia. His voice was rough, with 20 years of suppressed emotion, 20 years of loving her from a distance, 20 years of carrying the weight of a crime he hadn't committed. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't prove my innocence. I'm sorry I let you believe I had betrayed you. I'm sorry we lost so much time. We both lost time, Sophia said softly, tears streaming down her face as 20 years of carefully constructed walls began to crumble. We both believed a lie that was designed to destroy us. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to listen. I'm sorry I let my fear and hurt override everything I knew about the man you were. Chloe looked back and forth between her parents, seeing something she had dreamed of her entire life, the possibility of her family being whole again. The love that had created her finally free to exist without shame or secrecy. So what happens now? She asked quietly, her voice carrying both hope and trepidation. Sophia and Jacob looked at each other. 20 years of hurt and love and regret passing between them in a single glance that held the weight of their entire history. Now we focus on getting you well, Sophia said firmly, her voice stronger than it had been in decades. And then we figure out how to be a family again. If that's what you want, Jacob, if you can forgive me for not believing in us. There's nothing to forgive, Jacob said, his voice breaking with emotion. There's only love, Sophia. There's only the love that never died, no matter how hard we tried to bury it. Dr. Hartwell watched the reunion unfold with professional satisfaction and personal joy, knowing she was witnessing something rare and beautiful, a love strong enough to survive even the most carefully constructed lies. This is going to take time, she said gently. 20 years of hurt doesn't heal overnight, but if you're both committed to the work, to rebuilding trust and communication, then yes, families can heal. Love can survive anything if it's real enough. For the first time in 20 years, Sophia, Jacob, and Chloe sat together as a family, no longer defined by what had torn them apart, but by what would bring them back together. The road ahead would be difficult, marked by difficult conversations and careful rebuilding of trust. But for the first time since that terrible night when Sophia walked away, the future looked like something worth hoping for. Chapter 10. Hearts Reunited. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding each other for the first time, but about finding your way back home after being lost in the wilderness of misunderstanding and pain. 6 months later, Chloe Morris stood in the garden of the Pemberton estate, radiant in her role as maid of honor at her parents' second wedding. The leukemia that had nearly claimed her life was in complete remission, thanks to Jacob's bone marrow donation and the love that had surrounded her throughout recovery. Her dark hair had grown back thicker than before, and her smile carried the wisdom of someone who had faced mortality and emerged stronger. The venue was the same moonlit garden where Jacob and Sophia had first met 25 years ago, but everything else was different. Where their first wedding had been about passionate young love, this ceremony celebrated something deeper, a love that had endured betrayal, separation, and 20 years of heartbreak. Emerging unbroken, Sophia stood before the mirror, adjusting her simple cream-colored dress. At 43, she was more beautiful than at 23, her face showing character lines that come from surviving life's hardest tests. The wedding ring that had hung around her neck for 20 years now adorned her finger, joined by a new band that Jacob had designed, two circles intertwined, representing their separate journeys coming together. "You look perfect, Mum," Chloe said, entering with tears of joy. "Dad's going to lose his mind when he sees you." Sophia laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in decades. "I'm nervous." "Isn't that ridiculous?" "This is different," Chloe said wisely. "This time you both know what you're choosing. This time you're choosing it with full knowledge of what love can cost and what it's worth." The wedding was small, close friends, and family who had witnessed their journey. Dr. Pierce and Dr. Hartwell were in attendance, having played crucial roles in saving Chloe's life and healing their family. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Chloe said excitedly. "Dr. Pierce got my latest test results yesterday. I'm officially in complete remission. No cancer cells detected anywhere." Sophia's knees went weak with relief. "Chloe, why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because I wanted today to be perfect. I wanted Dad to walk you down that aisle, knowing we're all going to be okay." In the groom's suite, Jacob Morris adjusted his tie, hands slightly unsteady with emotion. At 45, he was more handsome than at 25, success and struggle having carved attractive lines around his eyes. But his green eyes held the same wonder they had carried the night he first saw Sophia. "You ready for this?" addressed James Fletcher, who had agreed to serve as his best man. "I've been ready for 20 years, Jacob replied. "I just can't believe she said yes. After everything we put each other through." "Some love is strong enough to survive anything," James observed. "You two prove that fairy tales can come true even when they take the scenic route through hell." The ceremony was conducted by the same minister who had married them 25 years earlier. As Sophia walked down the petal-strewn path toward Jacob, their eyes met and held, communicating volumes without words. "We gather today to witness something rare and beautiful," the minister began. "The renewal of a love that has survived every test life could devise." Jacob and Sophia come to this moment not as young people, but as adults who understand the true meaning of commitment. Jacob's vows were simple but profound. "Sophia, 20 years ago, I promised to love you forever. And I kept that promise, even when forever felt like an eternity of missing you. Today I promise not just to love you, but to choose you, to listen to you, to trust in us even when the world tries to tell us otherwise." Sophia's response brought tears to every eye. "Jacob, I promised you my heart once and never took it back, even when I thought you had broken it. Today, I promise you not just my love, but my trust, my partnership, my willingness to fight for us instead of against the shadows of our past." When they exchanged rings, Chloe stepped forward with a surprise. She handed them each a small, wrapped package containing matching watches, engraved with their first meeting date and a simple message: "Every moment counts." "Because," Chloe explained, "you taught me that no amount of time is promised, but every moment we have together is precious." The kiss that sealed their remarriage was deeper, more knowing, weighted with gratitude and understanding of how close they had come to losing each other forever. The reception was held under the same stars where they had first danced. Jacob and Sophia moved together with the same natural rhythm, but their dance was richer now, informed by loss and the hard-won knowledge of what truly mattered. "Any regrets?" Jacob murmured against Sophia's ear. "Just one," Sophia replied. "I regret the 20 years we lost, but I don't regret what we learned from losing them. We're stronger now, better for each other." "I love you, Mrs. Morris," Jacob said, the words carrying the weight of a quarter-century of devotion. "I love you too, Mr. Morris, forever and always, this time with the wisdom to make it last." Chloe's speech was particularly moving. "My parents taught me that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that get a second chance. They proved that some loves are so deep that not even 20 years of separation can kill them. They showed me that family isn't just about being related, it's about choosing to love each other every single day. Later, Sophia and Jacob found themselves alone in the garden where it all began, sitting beside the fountain where they had first kissed. Sophia's head rested on Jacob's shoulder as they marveled at the journey that had brought them back to this moment. "Do you think we would have made it if we hadn't been separated?" Sophia asked quietly. Jacob considered seriously. "I don't know. We were so young, so sure that love was enough. Maybe we needed to learn how precious it was by almost losing it. I'm glad Chloe got to see us find our way back to each other." "She already believes in love," Jacob said, kissing Sophia's head. "Look at the woman she's become. We raised an incredible daughter." Sophia lifted her head to look at him in the moonlight. "So what happens now?" "Now we get to discover who we are together at this stage of our lives," Jacob said, cupping her face. "We get to travel together, grow old together, watch Chloe build her own life. We get to have the marriage we were too young to have the first time, and if we face another crisis, and then we face it together the way we should have 20 years ago. We talk to each other instead of assuming the worst." Sophia smiled. "I like the sound of that future." As they kissed under the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting and now their reunion, Sophia and Jacob Morris finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place, but to each other. Their love story had taken the long way around, marked by heartbreak and separation. But it had also been marked by devotion that endured, hope that refused to die, and the kind of love that proved some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in no matter how dark the night becomes. In the end, it wasn't a perfect love story. It was something better. It was a real one, tested by fire and emerging as pure gold.